You know, folks, no institution works harder to give young people the best education in America than Hillsdale College. For 180 years, Hillsdale's mission has been to develop minds and improve hearts. Since 1844, Hillsdale has focused on learning, character, and faith to preserve liberty. And unlike many colleges, Hillsdale teaches how America became the freest and most prosperous nation on earth. Learn more in a wonderful short video at levinforhillsdale.com. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com.
You're invited to take a deep dive into the founding principles of the United States. Join Mark Levin and Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College, as they present Liberty and Learning.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. I'm here with Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College, our second episode of Liberty and Learning, our podcast partnership with the Westwood One Network, the Hillsdale College Network. We bring to you something very, very unique. Smart stuff. Yes, that's right. Substantive stuff about your country, about the future, about the history, and we do it in an intriguing and entertaining way. Dr. Arnn and I have known each other, hold on, Larry, how long? Over 40 years, for God's sakes? I think that's right. Over 40 years.
And since
we're buddies.
Since we're in our early 30s, that's amazing.
Pre-birth, that's a new one. But in any event, we're also good friends, so we're going to have a good time, and we're going to jump into this. And this is a very important topic this time, which is we have this massive government. People have written about it. I've written about it. Larry's written about it. All kinds of people have talked about this. How do we get this under control? This massive bureaucracy, these programs, the bureaucrats, the spending, it seemed impossible just a few years ago. And so, Larry Arnn, let's set the stage this way. Tell us about the Constitution, this fourth branch of government, representative government, separation of powers, this massive bureaucracy. What does that do to the constitutional construct?
Well, it violates it, changes it. It's a new form of government. So the first three articles of the Constitution are about the three branches of government. They all begin with the phrase, the blank power shall be vested in. Only the first one, about the Congress, says all the legislative power shall be vested in a Congress. But now, and that's, if you look at the doctrines of the American Revolution, if you look at John Locke's second treatise, delegating the legislative power out is a no-no because it's dangerous. So now the vast majority of our laws are not made by the Congress anymore. They're made by 150 or so. It's actually controversial because scholars debate how many agencies actually make laws for the federal government. And if they can't keep up with the number of agencies, how would they possibly keep up with the number of laws? It's a new kind of thing. And it has been thought for years. You and I have been talking about this for those 40-plus years we've known each other. And it has been thought you can't do anything about it. But the stars, as you said to me earlier today, have aligned, and now maybe there's a really unique chance to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Now, the issue here, too, is when you have a massive bureaucracy making all these laws, as you point out, Locke and so forth said, the legislature has no moral or legal right to delegate those powers because we elect that legislature, and when it delegates them, it takes our ability to affect the government away from us. Plus, look where they put it. They put it in the executive branch. The executive branch is not supposed to be a lawmaking branch. So this whole thing that really took off, you know, kind of Woodrow Wilson, but, you know, really with the New Deal and so forth, this has been enshrined now in so many ways in common thought and in the law. Then we get these Supreme Court rulings. How did these Supreme Court rulings help us?
Well, there are two and then a third and a fourth. The two, the first one is called West Virginia versus Environmental Protection Agency, and it held that that these agencies can't make rules about new subjects without direct authority from Congress. So here's an example. The EPA has been working on, I think they've done it, classifying CO2, that's carbon dioxide, which is the great majority of the Earth's atmosphere, as a pollutant. And then they start regulating carbon dioxide. for climate change purposes, right? Well, that's a major new thing, and the court ruled that they can't do that. The other one is called Loper-Bright versus Raimondo, and that attacks something called the Chevron doctrine. And Chevron is from a case involving the Chevron Oil Company. And what it says in that original Chevron case is, if the agency says that the law and the facts mean this thing, then we have to give them deference. We have to say they're the ones who know. And what the court said was, we don't do that anymore. Now we're going to look into the thing and see if it stands the scrutiny of a third branch of government. And you mentioned separation of powers. That's because men are not angels and angels do not govern men, to quote James Madison. Well, these agencies, as to their subject matters, which are very broad and they have been inventing new ones for themselves, they employ not just the rule makers, the legislators, they employ also those who carry out the laws, the executives, and they employ the judges who rule when there's a dispute about one of their actions. And that means there's no separation of powers inside these agencies. And the actual independent judicial branch of the government was taking the view that we have to accept extensively what they say. And now they don't. And if you put those things together, they make it possible to restrict the operations by and see, remember, who's going to do the restricting? Well, Donald Trump's been elected. He's supposed to be a tyrant. The thing about him, though, that makes him different in kind from any of these agencies is he is elected to do it, and if we don't like it, we can elect somebody else. And so he's saying that we're going to restrict these things to the definite purposes Congress has set for them and get them under control.
Now, isn't it interesting, Dr. Larry Arnn, that all the talk about Donald Trump, who doesn't believe in the Constitution, Donald Trump who won't follow the rule of law, and he's not a man of philosophy, he's not a man of the ancients, he's not a man of ideology. He comes at this from a businessman, a common sense perspective, that he's the one that's going to lead the most aggressive constitutional, and that's what it is, constitutional battle to begin to unravel this massive centralized government, the ubiquitous bureaucracy that nobody's really voted for. And yet the early, as you would say, the early progressives of the late 1800s, early 1900s, this was their dream to create this thing that they've created. And yet here's a man who's not a man that comes out of this from a philosophical perspective. He just says, this is wrong. Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah, it's galvanizing. And this article in the Wall Street Journal last week by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who are the joint heads of the Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE, a voluntary outside government agency where those two guys are not going to be paid. They have come up with a plan. In this Wall Street Journal article, people should read it, and it breaks new ground for me because they also have in there a legal way that the president can reduce the size, that is to say, the head count, as well as the subject matter of this massive bureaucracy that dominates America. And that, too, is a sort of a major achievement to think all that through. Now, they probably got a lot of help, but a lot of people have been thinking about this. And here's the thing about Trump. Winston Churchill was very fond of saying that a government should not do things that are dramatic, that it did not campaign on in the election. And Trump has now campaigned on this 3 times and won twice. And that means he has a mandate to do this specific thing. And I've been wondering, how's he going to do it? How can he dismiss large numbers of these people? And that brings up another pair of court cases. Come to find out, the president can do a reduction in force if a function of a bureaucratic agency is eliminated. And he is arguing, or these two men are arguing, Ramaswamy and Musk are arguing, that large part of the things that are done in the bureaucracy were not authorized by Congress. And so it would be a return to the rule of law to eliminate the function and the people who do the function. Mm-hmm. And they even indicate a plan for getting these people out of the government. And, you know, they'll get severance and they'll get help finding work in the private sector. And I've been saying for years, bureaucracies are not, as a rule, happy places. C.S. Lewis, in two of his novels, styles bureaucracy as hell, like hell. Everybody's suspicious. Everybody's struggling for power all the time. And I've often thought, these people, not only would the nation, many of these people would be happy if they had different kind of work. Mm-hmm. And of course we have to have a civil service, and they're not proposing to eliminate it. They're proposing to eliminate the unlawful parts of it. Mm-hmm. And those are probably large. They're studying it now.
Well, we're going to pursue this because it's very, very important. When we return, we're going to take our first break here. This is Liberty and Learning. He's Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College. I call it the shining college on a hill, sort of rephrasing what Ronald Reagan said. And, of course, I'm Mark Levin. He's the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. We are Westwood One Podcast Network. We have united here. We're partnered here to get this message to as many people as possible. And you can tell your friends and neighbors, too. Any podcast platform, that's where you can find us. We'll be right back. It's been since 1844 that Hillsdale College has offered the kind of rigorous, liberal arts education that our founders thought essential to preserving our liberties. This education is even more urgent today, when our liberties are under siege. Also special about Hillsdale is that every student signs an honor code, creating a campus culture where students debate ideas openly and honestly, pursue truth freely, learn to cherish America's great heritage of liberty, not tear it down. Sadly, this kind of education no longer exists in most of our colleges and universities. That's why I invite you to watch a brief video about Hillsdale College. It will seem like stepping back in time. Just 30 seconds, you'll see what I mean when I say that Hillsdale is educating for liberty. For 180 years, Hillsdale has focused not just on learning, but on character and faith, fostering an intelligent patriotism that is too short supply today. And you can watch that video and learn more at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. Welcome back to our podcast, Liberty and Learning. Dr. Larry Arnn of Hillsdale College, Mark Levin here, Westwood One. We're talking about what is really a historic opportunity being seized by President Trump and his folks to try and bring back constitutional government, a government that actually represents the American people, not this massive bureaucracy centralized in Washington, D.C., run by a bunch of self-appointed masterminds. You know, Larry Arnn, the fact of the matter is there are people in Washington, one party in particular, who want this status quo, who want this massive bureaucracy. I mean, they spent 80, 90 years building it. They'll shut down the government before they cut one penny from government or remove one employee out of the bureaucracy. It's treated much not more nicely, by the way, than the private sector. So there's going to be a really big battle, including a public affairs battle, isn't there?
Yeah, and, you know, this is a test of both parties, and both parties are complicit in this system. Both parties have helped to build it. It's probably true that the Democratic Party is closer to it now, but the question is, and see, it changes the rule, this thing, this maw, this massive thing, changes the job of a congressman. Because if they delegate to a huge bureaucracy the making of the laws, then they become sort of ombudsmen to represent their voters, to complain to the bureaucracy, right? They're supplicants now. And some have found that a comfortable position. And it's time they gave that up. It's time they went back to actually, you know, if you want to impose on every American an electric vehicle, if you want to reduce the industrial activity in America to save the climate, you ought to have to stand up and vote for it and report to your constituencies about it. And that's what legislation is about, right? It's hard. And that should be done with the consent of the people and accountable to them at regular elections.
100%. And the problem is when you have this massive, whatever you want to call it, pudding, jello, soup, whatever, this massive bureaucracy, the average person doesn't even know that they're passing laws and imposing laws, and the special interests work with the bureaucracy to advance their cause. But it seems to me one party does it because it's a power thing, because it's an ideological thing, because it goes back 100 years. How do you have this basically revolution in America? It's got to be top-down, bureaucratic. Whereas the other party, my party, the Republican Party, acquiesced to it. Maybe they enjoy dealing with special interests and lobbyists and that sort of thing. But one party is really ideologically driven. And I think the media are going to do everything they can to undermine this too. But isn't it a good thing? Donald Trump has 4 years. He knows he has 4 years. He's not going to run again. So he probably figures, damn it, I'm going to get this done come hell or high water. Don't you feel that's his mindset?
Yeah, he's very determined. And this Doge, at the end of this article we've been quoting, they name a delicious timetable, and that is on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, they intend to have their work done. Mm-hmm. And you know, they'll make, and what I think the pattern, I don't really know for sure, but I think the pattern is going to be, there is an office, it's called the Office of Management and Budget in the White House. And that's where the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, OIRA, is located. And that particular office has the job of reviewing every proposed rule. And so the head of OMB is to be Russ Vogt, a very good man, V-O-U-G-H-T, and he's experienced there. And he apparently will be the one receiving the recommendations from the Doge, and then he can do something about it. And then the point is, will he be stopped by the Congress and the courts? We'll see. The Republicans control both houses of Congress by narrow margins, but they would have to act, because their claim is that they can act legally under the blessing of these court cases. And see, court cases are not dispositive, right? Ultimately, the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land, and anybody can think whatever they want to about it. And courts can rule as they please about it. But if the Supreme Court, Lincoln said beautifully in response to the Dred Scott decision, maybe the worst Supreme Court opinion in American history, he said, the court decisions are bound to be respected. And if, however, they undermine the whole basis of government, they can be resisted. Well, these are three that don't need to be resisted. They need to be followed. And they do seem to me to follow the plain sense of the Constitution, which is that our elected representatives should be in control of it so that we can be in control of it.
You think the framers ever imagined that you'd have elected representatives in this legislature we call Congress, and that so many of them would say, I want to delegate my authority to something else? I mean, wouldn't they be, we talked about Locke and so forth, but wouldn't they be appalled by such an idea? Wouldn't they have assumed that they would want to protect their turf, protect their lawmaking ability? But in fact, the opposite has happened. Isn't that kind of weird?
Yeah. Well, they you know, in the sublime parts of the Federalist, and there are many, they make the argument that it is the ambition of the people who hold office under the three branches that they will protect themselves, and then they hold that each of the branches is given some power to resist the others. The president has a veto power. The Congress has oversight power and the power of the purse. And the judges dispose individual cases finally. And that means the arm of the law can reach out and get you, and they haul you in front of a judge, and he makes the final decision. He can't be fired by anybody in the other two branches. So they did. I think the answer, did they imagine? I think they did. And I think they set up protections. The trouble is the protections have been overcome because a kind of ideology swept over the thinking classes of America that, if we made the government more scientific and we centralized it more and we had experts deciding more things, we could improve or perfect the society. And this is a pregnant moment, in part because does anybody believe that anymore? Look, it's a mess, and we're broke, and we spend incredible amounts of money. And for a long time, for at least 2 generations, the American people answering the question, does it matter who wins elections, have answered, not much. And the reason is not much to do about this. Well, somebody's thought up a plan, and it looks like promising.
It really does look promising. Now, Congress did create something called the REINS Act, and that gave Congress the ability to look over, in certain circumstances, regulations issued by the executive branch. But they don't use it. And
that's right.
If it triggers a certain amount of money or triggers other things, they're supposed to review it, but they don't review it. So isn't it really time? The Republicans have a majority in the House and the Senate. I don't care how small it is. Isn't it really time that they work hand in glove in this endeavor? This is a monumental endeavor. This is a historic endeavor. If it even works 50 to 60% of what they hope it'll do, isn't it time for the Republicans in the Senate and the House to contribute to the limitation of government and use something they already have in place?
Yeah, that's, one, maybe, yes, it's time. It's possible that an obstacle is the federal government was not designed to do all of this. And it's too much, right? The institutions won't bear it. And most powers are reserved to the people and the states. And most powers need to be returned to them. And then there's not so much, right? The federal government is deciding, average fuel economy. They're deciding,
Congress says no. It's that simple. No. That is the Congress.
Would be just right.
Yeah,
that's right. The Congress should do that, and they have to, and who knows whether, because there's a 5 vote majority in the Republican Party, and there's a 3 vote majority, 4 more vote majority in the House right now. That's tight, and who knows how the Republicans will vote.
True.
Now, a lot of what they say in this article is that the president can do these things. Mm-hmm. He can eliminate regulations, and he can dismiss the people who are employed to enforce them, make them enforce them, and judge under them, and then he can give severance to those people. So I think they intend to just start doing this. Mm-hmm. And I think it'll be very interesting. I think Twitter is important because they can communicate. In other words, there's the mainstream media is going to denounce this, but already they're mentioning a string of things that the government is doing that are just embarrassing. So silly, so expensive, and there'll be a long string of those things. Because it is, what is it? There's, famous ones like wool is regulated, and
mushrooms are regulated, sugar's regulated. In fact, everything is regulated. The issue is what's not regulated. We're going to take a short break here, Dr. Larry Arnn, and go to our final segment of Liberty and Learning. You're hearing from Dr. Larry Arnn. This is episode 2. I'm Mark Levin. Dr. Arnn is president of Hillsdale College. I'm just a little guy with Westwood 1. If you want to pass this podcast and information on to friends and family, please do. Any podcast platform you can use. And if you want to check out Hillsdale, go to hillsdale.edu, hillsdale.edu. They have a great website, lots of information for you. It's very compelling. We'll be right back. Folks, no institution works harder to give young people the best education in America than my favorite college, Hillsdale College. For over 180 years now, Hillsdale's mission has been to develop the minds and improve the hearts of its students. And today, in just 30 seconds, you can learn what that means by watching a short video at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. Since 1844, Hillsdale is focused on learning, character, and faith, in providing just the kind of education needed to preserve liberty. And they extend their mission nationwide through outreach efforts like their free digest of Liberty Imprimis. At Hillsdale, students learn how America became the freest and most prosperous nation in history. And at a time when so many college campuses are rife with division, Hillsdale students sign an honor code promising to respect the rights of others and rise to self-government. Take some time to learn more about what makes Hillsdale College unique at levinforhillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com. Welcome back. This is Liberty and Learning, our joint podcast, a partnership between Hillsdale College and Westwood One, our networks, and our goal is to reach as many people as we can to promote constitutionalism, Americanism, and liberty. I'm here with Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College. Let me ask you a practical question, Larry, and it's this. I'm all for us announcing and explaining what we're doing and really doing it in a very aggressive way. Get it out there as much as you possibly can. Do you think, though, it was a mistake to write this piece in the Wall Street Journal 2 or 3 months before the president is actually sworn in to give his opponents an opportunity to dig in the bureaucracy and prepare? Or do you think it was wise to put it out now?
I believe in argument, and so it's going to be a fight whenever they do it. And I think these guys are getting to work. You can tell they've already thought about it a lot, and they're not getting paid. And all they're going to do, they're just, as a matter of fact, all they really are is just like you and me, right? They can, you and me, we can talk about whatever we want to. And so they're going to make a plan. They've been studying it. They seem to have independent means of support, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. And so they're just going to work away, and they've got some people helping them. And then they're going to go and make their recommendations. My own view is better if they make them out loud. Let us argue this through. It is amazing that you and I, Mark Levin, have lived to see an argument about this in the center of American politics, right in the middle of the storm. And we're arguing then about what kind of government we're going to have. That is so healthy.
You're right. It's amazing because we've gone so far along since even before the New Deal, where this is kind of the mindset in so much of the culture, where you, whether at Claremont or Hillsdale, I, writing and talking about this forever, pushing back. And now here really are people who, not the least likely, but unlikely people to be carrying this flag. Donald Trump, as I said before. I mean, Elon Musk, it was just a few years ago, he was a liberal Democrat. Vivek Ramaswamy pretty much comes out of nowhere over the last 3-4 years and so forth. And this triumvirate, with obviously many other people working with them and behind them, are going to advance a cause that you and I and so many constitutionalists have embraced for so long. It's really exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, the swamp. Trump was going to drain the swamp. Turns out it's pretty sticky in there, hard to get in, hard to get out. But here's a plan, and it is a different thing in kind from any plan. Reagan had the Grace Commission, and they made a lot of recommendations to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, and that was very healthy. The problem was not as acute as it was back then. For example, since then, starting then though, the public employee unions are an extremely powerful force in politics, and that they're in a conflict of interest, right? Because they support people who will build up their kind of thing. and almost exclusively they do that, and they're huge givers. And, if they decide to oppose you in a district, they can bring a lot of money in. And so the point is all that's gotten worse, right? And now it's not just recommendations. It's recommendations that are actionable by the President of the United States. And here's a guy who says he's going to do it and got elected saying he's going to do it.
Mm-hmm. I think when you look at Donald Trump and you look at Elon Musk, those two in particular, they've been subjected to the wrath of the bureaucratic state and the abuses of power. We don't need to go through it with Donald Trump. They're just legion at this point. But same with Elon Musk. Once he decided, you know what, I'm not really buying into this hard left stuff anymore. I believe in free speech and I'm going to buy Twitter. He comes under criminal investigation. His businesses come under investigation. He comes under attack. I think it's almost the big picture, yes, but it's almost, look at what I, as an individual, powerful men have experienced from this government just by speaking out against them. Do you think that's part of it?
Oh, yeah. Well, they it's mean, right? It's very dangerous. If there's a great, I can't remember the name of the lady I asked, but there's a journalist, and she was defending the European Union with J.D. Vance, and he said, the European Union is threatening to take 5% of Twitter's global revenues because he had Donald Trump, a candidate for president, on Twitter in an interview, right? And Trump was thrown off Twitter for years before Musk bought it, and that meant he couldn't communicate with people. And this idea that that you can interpose these agents, by the way, under direct pressure from the other party controlling the White House and the executive branch, they pressed these social media companies to cancel Donald Trump. And that's, there's a journalist for the Daily Telegraph named Allison Pearson, and she got a visit from 2 years ago. It's been going on for 2 years now, from the London cops, and they have a category called non-criminal hate crime. That is to say, they call on you, and they might for a social media post. And she said, a journalist, and she said, which one? And they said, we cannot tell you. Which social media post? And then they said, and this is the British police. And then they said, she said, who complained? We cannot tell you. And then they want to interview her, and they have many times about her various opinions. And cops, policemen, and are these dangerous or not? And to this minute, she doesn't know which social media post, and she doesn't know who complained. And, she's not a hate crime person. She's a respected journalist. And, which is, by the way, a small category of person these days.
Well, Larry Arnn, let me say this. It's always a pleasure to talk to you on and off a podcast. I really am happy that so many people get to listen in on our discussion here. The sort of things that are discussed among us, sort of things that are discussed at Hillsdale. And it's very, very important that people know these things. That is, that while every day people are busy in their own lives, things are taking place in their own lives, there are people out there trying to think about, well, how do we get our liberty back? How do we get our Constitution back? And this is what you do. This is what Hillsdale does. And I'll tell you, one of the great things about Hillsdale, my audience knows this from radio, is how Hillsdale reaches well beyond its buildings, well beyond its campus, into Americans' homes and into their lives, as you do on my radio show and elsewhere, making these, these arguments, making these philosophers, making faculty really available throughout the country for anybody who wants to use them. I don't know of another college or university does that. Quite the contrary. They're very shuttered. They're very opaque. They're indoctrination mills and so forth and so on. And as you said earlier in their show about their Wall Street Journal piece, Vivek and Elon, we're about ideas. We're about discussion. So any final remarks about Hillsdale itself?
Hillsdale is a place of learning. Mostly we don't study immediate contemporary politics. We study things that are eternal. And among the things eternal is politics. What is politics? What does it mean? Why do we have them? Right? So that's what we do. And we have 60,000 or 70,000 visitors a year from our campus to our campus. You're invited to come. It's an open place. We argue all day long and read great books.
And that's very, very important. All right, Dr. Larry Arnn, I can't wait for episode 3. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday over there at Hillsdale, and you and all of you folks who are listening as well. Don't forget to tell your friends and family. Any podcast platform you use, that's where you can find us, Liberty and Learning. You want to check out Hillsdale, go to hillsdale.edu, hillsdale.edu. I strongly encourage it. And until next time, God bless you, my friend, and God bless all of you out there. It's been since 1844 that Hillsdale College has offered the kind of rigorous, liberal arts education that our founders thought essential to preserving our liberties. This education is even more urgent today, when our liberties are under siege. Also special about Hillsdale is that every student signs an honor code, creating a campus culture where students debate ideas openly and honestly, pursue truth freely, learn to cherish America's great heritage of liberty, not tear it down. Sadly, this kind of education no longer exists in most of our colleges and universities. That's why I invite you to watch a brief video about Hillsdale College. It will seem like stepping back in time. Just 30 seconds, you'll see what I mean when I say that Hillsdale is educating for liberty. For 180 years, Hillsdale has focused not just on learning, but on character and faith, fostering an intelligent patriotism that is too short supply today. And you can watch that video and learn more at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com.